Here we are in Struggle of Empires. This is the French turn in the fourth round of the First War. They played pirates, which was a successful attack on this Dutch colony. Now that brings the Dutch and the French into equilibrium, but the Dutch still can attack the French there. The French also built an infantry unit and brought it over to North America. They're kind of feeling like they're losing some ground here to the Dutch, and maybe to a lot of other players, so they're kind of worried. For the Spanish turn, they picked up Cossacks to help defend their position in Central Europe. It's a minor position, but they want the force there, and maybe they'll make an offensive action there as well. And then they launched an attack against the Italian two-point city. That puts them tied for the lead in the Mediterranean. They have their Ottoman Empire bonus. So their total strength there was 2 plus 1 for the Ottomans plus 1 for their navy. Allowed them to dominate one of the minor Italian states. All they really wanted to do. On to Austria. The Austrians paid for one of these army training, and they also paid $2 for an attack, taking an unrest for that. They made the attack in the Caribbean against the Dutch, who only had 1 strength point there, and they were at +1, +2 because of their naval support that allowed them to take one of the colonies. They want extra colonies there because they have the sugar plantations. They're going to try to come up with some wealth out of that. Okay, well, that's Austria. And now we go to the Dutch. Well, the poor Dutch are struggling. They took Saxony in order to help solidify their holding in the German states. Really a defensive move, but they saw it as more valuable than most things they could do. But they also made an attack, a naval attack on these pirates, paying $2, i.e. more unrest, and then they lost, and so they took another unrest for that and failed to dislodge those pirates. Kind of a painful situation. Now you can attack the pirates and then immediately take them as your second action by my reading of the rules. It's not really absolutely clear how that's worded. It almost sounds like you get them for free when you attack them, but I don't think that's the case. I think they go into discard pile and then they can be taken. So now we move on to Prussia. Prussia took their turn. They grabbed the Indian Nawab and put themselves in a quick position, taking the 1-point Indian as a colonial possession now. Trying to get some strength there, really. If they get enough, they can start collecting gold with the East India Company. The East India Company works in both India and in the East Indies. So that might be their next step then for the Prussians. For England's turn, they tried to take sole highest value in the German states because of its high return on the investment. They wanted to drive Austria and other people down a little bit in terms of how many points they get. So they attacked the German states. They had 3 units here. That's even. They get +1 for their Bavarians and +1 for their army training. However, they rolled poorly, or actually not. Whatever they attacked, Hesse or something like that, rolled very well. So they lost a unit, took more unrest. They also had to take unrest for the attack itself. Their other play, they grabbed the Sweden counter to try to perform the same kind of actions over there in the Baltic. The Cossacks are already in Spain's hands, so they wanted to at least get one of the other allies that they can. That leaves us last but not least with the Russians. And the Russians closed things off, picking up the Naples diplomatic chit, giving them an advantage in the Mediterranean. And they also built a navy, which they sent there. They feel like they need the 3 navies, one in Africa in case slaves come up, they have a shot at it, one in the Caribbean to help defend their interests there, and then one in the Mediterranean so that they can work for expansion in either the Ottoman Empire or the Mediterranean, whichever one works better from their point of view. They're in a position where they could attack the Austrians, for example, in the Ottoman Empire to drive them down, or maybe if they can ship some troops over to take the last of the Mediterranean ships and take full control of that. Either way, it's a couple of points advantage over a couple of players, and they're competing with everyone right now, so they just want to try to get that lead if they can. All right, well, now we're on to the fifth, and everybody slides back into their position. And this is the final round for, the final round for this war, which means we're about ready to go into scoring, and people had better set themselves up. A lot of people were looking at that this turn. Hey, where can I get my points? What can I do? They're also going to have to play if anybody has any triangles left. For example, the Austrians with their sugar plantations, they're going to have to trigger them now. And that's a free action, but it does mean, hey, if you want to get your cash, this is the time to do it. For France's turn, with no presence at all in Europe at this point, and good holdings in East Indies and North America. They're worried most about their South American holding. They can't really expand easily. So they took their turn by dropping a fort into South America, and it made it. And they purchased the Gauchos to give them a little bit of defense down there. Spain's turn, they picked up a Levant company and grabbed a couple of bucks off of it for two of their counters. Then they made an attack and took the last of the Italian territories. Ordering's an iffy thing there. They could have made the attack first. The Levant company should be theirs. They could have made the attack first instead of triggering the chit. And had they done that, they would make more money off of it, but they would have had to take some unrest counters for that. They'd rather end up a buck short right now and solidify their power for next turn rather than that. And they may take both Levant company chits if they get the chance, just because they are really assembling some strength down there in the Mediterranean and the Ottoman Empire. They have the chit to give them power there. They think it's an interesting situation. Okay, that puts us to Austria. For the Austrian turn, well, they did an interesting combination too. They went into debt to attack the last of the Dutch territories here, gathering more Caribbean island locations, then triggered off their sugar plantations, getting $4, and then they spent that and some more unrest to grab a second army training. That makes them the best army in the world right now. Of course, there's still an army training left, so someone could match them, but as of right now, they have that +1 even against the other people, and there are quite a few who have army training. The Russians do, the Dutch do, and the English do. And the way they're looking at it is, other than Spain, well, for the most part, they're positioned in conflict with people who have these counters, so they wanted that advantage at this point. It puts us to the Dutch. So the Dutch took their turn and built themselves a navy, spending a population, and then drove those pirates off. That gives them the sole possession of the lead spot in South America. Big bonus, hard to tell, but their other options were really along those lines. That's where they're trying to expand their influence. So they didn't really, taking the gold mines and getting a buck for that didn't seem terribly valuable. So they went along along that path. Now we go to Prussia. Prussia continued their growth in India. They grabbed the East India Company, took $1. That was enough to pay for an attack. Completed one, got a second location there. That doesn't give them extra victory points. It'll give them a little extra money. But the biggie is they're establishing themselves as a power in India. Once, if we see the counters come out next turn, first of all, there's already one there that'll give a $3 bonus if you take it, as well as they're probably the only person with the kind of power to take that counter out. And they'll, if they see more India counters show up, and I don't know how many there are, they'll be able to grab those more easily. If not, maybe they can move into the East Indies, where they already have the East India Company, in order to, gain more income for their next turn. Now it's England and then Russia. So for England's turn, they grabbed Denmark for $1, and that's the last of the diplomatic spaces, which means it was kind of a bum deal. Who bought that up? Spain took the diplomatic service. Well, there's no more diplomacy to be made like that. So Spain basically took a tile that really wasn't worth too much. It allowed them to grab one extra, the diplomacy for which, they could have taken a tile anyhow, but they're getting no bonus from it. All the diplomatic tiles have fallen now. Oh, not quite. Maybe they can get the Native Americans next turn if they go early. But England also then made an attack on Prussia and took the lead in the Baltic states. They couldn't attack the Dutch. They didn't really feel like they had a good chance in the German states, so this was what they saw as their best move for expanding their point total this turn. Looks like they're going to get away with the East Indies here and a couple points there that I kind of expected them maybe not to get. But finally, Russia. Well, Russia did not have a good turn. They picked up navigation. They feel like mobility is really important to them, and they want to make sure that their armies, when traveling across the world, they're in so many different locations, can do so without a problem. So that seemed like a good move. But then with their second move, since they couldn't take a chit, they took an unrest counter and attacked in the Ottoman Empire against the Austrians. They lost there, lost a unit, took an unrest chit. Painful action on something that maybe, it didn't gain them, it wasn't going to gain them points. It was just going to hurt someone else. But their odds of taking the Turks out, or the Prussians out down here, were low, and there was nothing else really for them to take. So they went with that. Okay, now we come to sort of a scoring phase for this war. And how does that happen? Well, first we have the income and maintenance. Everybody gets a buck or a gold for each population and for each control marker they have. But they have to pay maintenance of 1 for each unit that they have. So let's take a look and start from France. France has 3 population left, so that's 3 bucks. 4, 5, but let's drop it down to 3. 4, drop it down to 2. 5, 6, up to 5. So they make a few bucks off this turn. And likewise, we'll do that with everyone. I guess I have time. Hey, I'll just come back and show the money at the end. After that, everybody's population is going to shoot up by 5, just to give them more ability to build armies, etc. Then we'll go through the victory points and score the different areas. So, some players made decent money. The French and English made some pretty decent gains in cash. Others didn't make so much. In fact, Russia lost a buck. Prussia lost a couple bucks, which they had to pay for with unrest. So clearly, having a large army, as Prussia does, can be a painful event. And you need to kind of realize, wow, you're going to take on a burden by having that. Now we're at the victory point phase, and let's see what people get at the various areas. And this is just the racetrack like any Euro game, but I might as well play it out. Let's look at North America. The French get 4. They're solely in control there. And the Dutch and Prussians each get 2, because they're tied for second. In the Caribbean, it's kind of hard to see what's going on, but the Austrians get 5 points. And Russia's in second for 3. That Spanish holding is worthless. Might be valuable to someone else, but it's not providing anything for them. Over in South America, well, the Dutch were able to get their 5-point lead there, and the French and Russians each get 3. Keep going. Well, let's stay in the non-continental Europe area. In Africa, Russia gets 3 and no one else gets anything. In India, the Prussians get 5 and no one else gets anything. Over in the East Indies, the French get 4 and the English get their first 2. Remember, the English haven't really committed anything outside of Europe, so it's really a bonus for them. Let's start looking in the European areas. In the Ottoman Empire, Spain, Austria, and Russia all get 4. Now that's what's weird here. Spain. This is Spain's first score. Central Europe, England gets 6, Spain gets 4. And England's making their move now. Over in the Baltic, England gets 5, the Dutch get 3. Okay. What else do we need to score? We still have to score the big German states. Ooh. England and Austria each get 8. That's some big points there. This is the other Austria. And then Spain and the Dutch get 5 each. And then down in the Mediterranean, Spain gets 6. And we see that European strategy is a good move now. And Russia and Prussia get 4 each. At least in terms of the early game, it's the people who are in Europe who are scoring the biggest. Being primarily outside of Europe looks to be a bone early on. Will it always be? I don't know. You know, obviously that's where the big points are. So if people are fighting over lesser points, that's their own fault. Of course, some of those things look like they require more effort to be in. But yeah, the French and the Prussians are 2 people who are largely based outside of Europe and really not doing very well at all. And they haven't had to necessarily fight too hard. The French and the Dutch fought over here. But for the most part, and the Austrians inserted themselves here. The Austrians got kind of lucky by having, full value in the Ottoman Empire. That's the beginning. We give everybody back their control tokens, and we're going to go back to another war here. But before we actually start bidding positions, we have to put out 10 new countries. And that'll be where we start on the next video, because this one has gone long enough. All right.